Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today, we're going to be talking about the newest album from Poppy called Am I a Girl? So there's something concerned me about Poppy for some time now, and really more than ever going into her output from 2018. How long would the Satire hold? Because let's face it, for as much as I enjoyed Poppy Computer, there was the unanswered question surrounding what that next step could even be for her musically if she wanted to continue down that route. What worked about that album was how, on some level, it was both a dissection of that pop idol and the system that props her up, but also a celebration of the craft all the same. And there was enough poise to split the difference between the dark, subversive nightmare fuel and the plastic sheen of bubblegum pop. Overall, I found the album pretty excellent, probably praising it more than most people, even if it was taking one too many sidelong glances at a sound where Grimes had laid a lot of the groundwork. Kind of ironic given that Grimes is now on this new Poppy album coming out here. But to be blunt, 2018 hasn't exactly been great for Poppy. I'm putting aside the whole Titanic Sinclair Mars Argo drama, most because in mid-September a judge dismissed the case and there were a lot of ugly, convoluted layers that aren't relevant to the music here right now, but it's hard to deny the plotline of the videos in 2018 has felt a little undercooked compared to the build-up of Poppy Computer, and considering how the YouTube Premium series never properly took off, I wasn't sure what more satirical territory they could really target. What also raised some alarm bells was the expanded team behind the project. Yes, Poppy and Titanic Sinclair, they still had writing credits on pretty much everything, but the team behind them was much bigger, and it was hard not to see Diplo's increased involvement as a label head, looking to deliver a more commercially viable product. And I didn't want to see good pop satire diluted by the larger pop industry machine. But hey, Am I a Girl could still work, right? Well, yes and no. Okay, let me get this out of the way quickly and bring some saturation back in here right now. Before I get into a more complicated thematic dissection of this album, come on, it's pop satire. This sort of deconstruction, it's my comfort zone as a critic. I don't think this album is nearly as good as Poppy Computer. It's certainly stepping a little further outside of the comfort zone of Poppy, but in terms of the pure appeal, there's a sour, oddly defensive twinge to Am I a Girl that sadly doesn't translate as well in this lane. Don't get me wrong, I think that the intersection of indie pop rock that Poppy inhabits has a lot of potential going forward, but the pivot this album takes, while having some potential if properly developed, it feels really undercooked and lacking some of the distinctive personality and internet-driven originality of Poppy and Poppy Computer last year. Actually, you know what? Let's focus in on the computer portion of this for a second, because so much of Poppy's original appeal was grounded in a surprisingly intuitive deconstruction of internet fame and culture, and Poppy Computer managed to hit the balance between living in the memes and crossing over to a slightly broader fan base. Am I a Girl? It takes the unfortunately expected approach of confining the internet culture iconography and the memeable weirdness to subtext at most, and I can't help but feel that was a major misstep right out of the gate. Sure, fans might know that the interludes obviously represent a new iteration of Poppy getting reincarnated with a slightly different personality for this iteration, and I know that this far in, it kind of makes sense for Poppy to take on more conventionally human characteristics, but this is where intent convies with execution. And that Poppy, as a pop singer, she's limited. Not a bad singer, takes a lot of work to convincingly play a near-human robotic presence, but when you get the exaggerated snootiness of Aristocrat, or how much she slips off-key on the Rapture Ball, it makes you question whether or not she would have been better sticking with the groove-heavy internet weirdness, when it could have just been explained through the uncanny valley of the internet rather than some very human vocal slip-ups that do kind of tarnish that perfect illusion. And this is where we might as well start talking about theme and metaphor, because in comparison with the more unique underlying arc of Poppy Computer, Am I a Girl actually feels pretty conventional, with a steady ascent into decadence coinciding with increased degeneracy and depravity, leading to an apocalyptic and gory ending placed with a maximum ironic juxtaposition on X between bubbly 60s pop and a howling blast of something that's damn near death metal. Now, on the one hand, I can't deny that the arc and the framing, it kind of makes sense for the times we're currently living in, and if we're going for a late-stage capitalism read of all this, down to the incredibly on-the-nose Marie Antoinette references on Aristocrat, it is checking off the very conventional boxes and retelling the story. But there are problems with that, and the first is that even in mainstream pop, this is territory that's been gone through before. Hell, Katy Perry was framing herself as Marie Antoinette in the video of Hey 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 just earlier this year, and while that song is still terrible, it fit Katy Perry's self-destructive tendencies better than Poppy playing the synthesized cipher. But what actually might annoy me even more is the framing of all of this. As I said, going back to Poppy Computer, that album's genius was digging into the madness of the deconstruction of the pop music industry, but still walking away celebrating and valuing pop music at the end. But Am I a Girl either waters down that celebration or just throws it out altogether. And this is coming from somebody who actually really loves Play Destroy with Grimes and X. They're great songs in blending pop and metal and industrial music, but thematically, they're playing in juxtaposition nightmare fuel. And given how this album ends, it's a much darker conclusion in that apocalypse, no matter what major key chord you tack onto the end of X. That's not subversive, it's not escapist, it's a likely reality in some cases. And given how little distinctive character that Poppy has throughout this album, the larger arc just slides towards a lot of doomsday cult cliches, and frankly, she can do better than that. Granted, Poppy's lack of more distinctive character, even between reboots, is starting to get a little exasperating, especially if her iconography is supposed to be inspiring that cult, especially if she's embracing anti-populist symbols like Marie Antoinette. And then you wind up clinging to snippets that only can paint something of a picture, and then you start noticing that when we do get a human element, it can feel more than a little bit reflective of the previous year outside of the Poppy veneer. On the one hand, the self-aware questioning directed at Titanic Sinclair's career guidance on hard feelings, that managed to cut surprisingly well. It's another album standout, and I really appreciated how Grimes was dying while Poppy survived on Play Destroy, showing the increased cannibalization of pop acts in this industry. But on the other hand, there's more than a little bit of defensiveness creeping into the empowerment of Fashion After All and Chic Chick. And then there's the title track. And look, given that the song came after a Poppy reboot interlude, I can accept how the concept of gender might blur for that character. And it's not like she doesn't co-opt masculine cliches across the album as a whole, especially on Chic Chick. But in comparison with someone like Kesha, who has always brought up that brashly subversive side since the very beginning of her career, when you see in interviews Poppy only started flirting with the idea of blurring the gender binary in her art when other celebrities started doing it, it starts feeling even more hollow, especially when the internet culture side of queer spaces would have been an easy step for her if she wanted to explore something that was even somewhat real. But going in this vein is just another hole punched in her deconstruction going in a much less compelling direction. A very dangerous idea when this project exposes how many ideas were just underexposed or not thought through coming off the last album, or just abandoned for something that's less interesting or nuanced, but likely more accessible territory. And here's the frustrating part. For as critical as I'm being here, it's coming because I actually like a fair number of these songs on a compositional level. Yeah, the Grimes comparison, it's obvious, more so than ever at this point, especially given how the album ends and then Grimes shows up herself, but the commitment to actual groove and a lot of the bass lines and low-end beats balanced out with the blaring, glittery synths and a Technicolor approach to melody, that's still a pretty good one, even if most of the chiptune is pitched to the side in favor of slightly more diverse, oily tones that are allowed to pick up a little bit more glitchiness and body and a deeper sense of atmospherics. And this might be the only place where stepping away from the more blatant internet and vaporwave inspiration might have actually reaped some considerable rewards, like the sleek techno touches around Fashion After All, or the delicate pluckiness of Aristocrat that sounds like a big riff on Lady Gaga's Alejandro, or the misty pulse of Hard Feelings, or the creaking synthetic strings of the Rapture Ball, and especially the pop guitars that slice into the final few songs of the squealing crunch, probably owing more to late 90s alternative metal and industrial music than anything else. Seriously, while Poppy is far from the first who's tried to split the difference going both pop and metal, I'd argue she's at least as credible as baby metal is in this lane, and ends the album with probably two of my favorite songs here. It's got a good juxtaposition, the tunes are actually pretty good, I like both tracks. But on the flip side, it's really impossible to ignore how this also leads to the more conventional songs that aren't all that interesting coming from Poppy. We might not be getting trap snares or triplet flows, but between the watery hand clap on Iconic, the gummy, pitch-shifting bass pop of In a Minute that could have been imported from a Mike Will Made It song circa 2013, and Diplo's very obvious grainy synth warp of Time Is Up, you can tell that they were trying to dilute the formula for more mainstream accessibility. And that's before you make the comparison to earlier cuts that at least tried for something a little bit more unearthly and weird, which on this album, even in the production, just isn't quite materializing the way I was hoping. But as a whole, look, I will give Poppy credit where it's due. This is not a bad album, and I understand the direction coming down from the label to likely push her more in this direction. Kind of ironic now that all the pop subversion is now creeping into her actual creative body of work. And again, the grooves, the hooks, they remain solid. And I won't deny that some of the writing has some of her own distinctive flavor. A Poppy song sounds like a Poppy song. But man, overall, this is the wrong push across the board, moving her away from the core of her persona towards something that's increasingly thin and cliched in pop subversion. And given that the deconstruction is the foundation of all of her appeal in all categories, it's that postmodernism that draws people back. That's a major problem, both here and going forward. And thus for me, yeah, solid 6 out of 10, recommended for the fans, but this might not reflect well on Poppy, especially going forward. And I hope that going into 2019, her year is going to be better, and that her course corrects sooner rather than later. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. Yeah, I know, this kind of got a little bit darker than I was hoping. I was kind of wishing this album was going to be a lot better, but hey, that's what happens when you get a little bit less interesting across the board and you start throwing aside the stuff that was good in the first place. Beyond that, hey, if you want to actually support the album, or you can buy and stream it, links down there below. And I got the poll up there for all you Poppy fans. Tell me how wrong I am. Looking forward to it. Beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. If you guys want to get involved in my scheduling process or help support the channel, link to my Patreon right over there, where 3 times a week you guys get to vote for my schedule, and once a week for the higher tier contributors, guys get to add albums, movies, or even a top 10 list to that schedule. More details right there. You want to see my schedule, it's linked down there below, and it's on my Instagram. But until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.